Today, we're diving into one of the most horrific and hidden chapters of history, something so insidious that it was kept quiet for decades. It's a story of survival, despair, and the unimaginable cruelty faced by women in Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War. This is the untold story of forced prostitution in Nazi Germany. In the early 1940s, the Nazi regime was desperate to increase the productivity of its forced laborers in concentration camps. Heinrich Himmler, one of the most powerful and sinister figures in Nazi Germany, devised a horrific plan to achieve this goal. Himmler ordered the establishment of brothels, yes, brothels, inside 10 concentration camps. His twisted logic was that offering forced sexual services to hard-working male prisoners would motivate them to work harder. But make no mistake, this was not about helping prisoners or improving their quality of life. It was just another method of control, humiliation, and exploitation. It all started in March 1942. Himmler's SS began recruiting women from the Ravensbrück women's concentration camp, though recruiting is a gross understatement. These women were selected under the guise of volunteering. They were promised better living conditions, regular meals, medical care, and protection from the horrors that other prisoners faced daily. But was it really voluntary? Absolutely not. The women were given an impossible choice: endure the brutal labor, starvation, and abuse of camp life, or volunteer for work in these brothels. For many, the promise of survival was too powerful to ignore. Initially, the SS targeted women who had been prostitutes before their imprisonment. Later, they expanded their selection to include women accused of racial defilement, having relationships with Jews, Russians, or Poles, and others deemed undesirable by Nazi ideology. Jewish women were excluded from these brothels due to the Nazis' twisted racial laws. The women chosen had to undergo medical examinations to ensure they were free of sexually transmitted diseases and physically capable of performing this horrific work. The brothels were grim, sterile buildings with rows of small, sparsely furnished rooms. A central corridor connected the rooms, and SS officers monitored everything through peepholes in the doors. Even in this horrific setting, the Nazis maintained control and discipline. Male prisoners who wanted to visit the brothel had to meet strict criteria. Only those considered valuable workers were allowed this so-called privilege, and they had to pay 2 stamps to enter, something most prisoners couldn't afford. Before visiting, the men also underwent medical checks to ensure they wouldn't spread diseases. For many of them, visiting the brothel wasn't just degrading, it was a constant reminder of their helplessness and complicity in the system of exploitation. For the women, life in these brothels was pure hell. They weren't just victims of the Nazis, but also of the male prisoners who were desperate to survive in their own way. The humiliation was twofold. They were treated as tools of productivity and as pawns in a system designed to strip away every ounce of their humanity. While the Nazis justified this system as a way to boost productivity, they could have achieved the same result by simply improving conditions for all prisoners: better food, humane treatment, and adequate rest. But cruelty was the point. Himmler and his SS wanted to break people's spirits, pitting prisoners against one another and creating an environment of utter despair. Shockingly, many of the women forced into these brothels survived the war, partly because their work kept them slightly better fed and protected. But survival came at a cost. After the war, these women faced a new kind of torment. Society judged them harshly, assuming they had willingly worked as prostitutes. Few spoke openly about their experiences, and those who did were often ignored or silenced. It wasn't until the 1990s that survivors began to share their stories publicly. One such survivor, Margaret, bravely recounted her ordeal. She was one of only 16 women chosen from tens of thousands of prisoners at her camp. Her story, like many others, reveals the impossible choices these women had to make just to stay alive. Tragically, these women were never recognized as victims. They received no compensation, no acknowledgement of their suffering. Only one woman in 1966 attempted to claim compensation, but her request was denied. The reason? The statute of limitations had expired. This denial of justice adds another layer of heartbreak to their already harrowing stories. They were forgotten by the world, a world that chose to look away from their suffering. Friends, the stories of these women matter. They show us the depths of human cruelty, but also the incredible strength and resilience of the human spirit. These women endured unimaginable horrors, not for any reward or recognition, but simply to survive another day. We cannot let their stories fade into obscurity. By remembering their suffering, we honor their resilience and ensure that such atrocities are never repeated. If you found this story as haunting and important as I did, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Let's keep these stories alive and continue to learn from history. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.